Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's load this in. So we're going to close this environmental contamination model, that hybrid model where we had pathogen reservoirs simulated with system dynamics, and we're going to go back to hybrid models and load in CTL state variable, this one, okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, if we double click on a person here, on the person class, we'll initially see something that's a little bit puzzling perhaps. We see that it can be living or dead. But if you scroll to the right, you'll find actually a fairly articulated theory about their immune system status and its dynamics over time. So this model was created back in the days of our collaboration with someone named Alan Ross. Here we have a depiction of the immunological dynamics of a given person. Alan knew quite a bit actually about immunological dynamics. So here we have a stock, an accumulation of that represents free virions in a person, free virus particles. X and Y represent uninfected cells and infected cells, and cells can die via attack by the cell-mediated immunity, the cytotoxic T lymphocytes. Now, the presence of infected cells can stimulate an immune response, and we have some quite detailed models, particularly for chlamydia, depicting immune response, also for flu. But in this case, it's a very simple model based on some published work, stimulates immune response, and that builds up immune system cells, cytotoxic T lymphocytes, that then can attack infected cells. So in short, ladies and gentlemen, a person can get invaded here by viruses from neighbors in a network. That flows into here. That leads to an infection cascade that leads cells to get infected. Infected cells build up. That stimulates the production of cytotoxic T lymphocytes, or the activation of said cytotoxic T lymphocytes, which kills off the infected cells. So there's an initial expansion in virus particles and infected cells, which stimulate a response from the immune system, which lowers the level of infected cells, thereby lowering the level of virus particles. Turns out that virus particles are produced through this link here from Y to this. So in short, this is a schematic description of how we overcome infections. Viruses come in, cells get infected, our immune system starts to respond. We feel miserable in the meantime, but our immune system gets underway. Cell-mediated immunity kicks in. It starts to kill off the infected cells, brings the virus under control. So let's go run this, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to run this with this thing called high fatal viral threshold. And the idea here is that we're gonna simulate people within a network here. Don't run it too fast. Sorry. Let's slow it down. Slow it down to normal speed. Let's put it back to 1.0. That's that little button there. That'll bring it back to 1.0, okay? Let's run this thing out. One person is going to start infected here, ladies and gentlemen, and we're awaiting their activation here. There they go. Now the redness, I think, is determined by viral load. How do you think we did that? How do you think we made the redness of this circle depend on their viral load? Anyone want to hazard a guess based on this course? So we went up here, and it's actually this little circle. This was created in an earlier version of AnyLogic, which you had to do more manually. But there's this thing called people color. Oh man, I don't know. One recognizes the cat by its weaker claws. Okay, people color. Okay, now where did people color come from? People color, here we are. And people color was set, okay, oh man, this isn't how we do it these days, that's for sure. Okay, so if it was a certain level, okay, do it through this. Okay, we won't dwell on that. In short, it was based on the viral load level. And the width of this circle, the radius of the circle, was set by the immune system response. So here are these neighbors of that person getting infected, but their immune system kicks in and starts to suppress the infection. You'll notice they get quite sick. Their viral level goes pretty high before their immune system kicks in, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Here we go. But eventually they bring the system under control, and the virus is spreading through here. And then you get secondary infections. So if we go down and we look at the level of a single person, we could see their viral load is actually undergoing these spikes. You see this? These kind of spikes, the level of a single person, person 0. We can go down and look at their V, and you'll find them oscillating as their viral load continues to sort of oscillate among secondary exposures and buildup of immune system response. So we could also go look at an individual in terms of their their immune system response here, and you'll also find variability as their immune system decays, etc. Anyway, this is an example. We have characteristics of a person's internal dynamics, characterizing in stocks and flows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these sort of models are very important to understand, because often with system dynamics depictions, system dynamics is exquisite for depicting regulatory processes that involve feedback. And here there's many types of feedback. Buildup of viruses lead to spread of infected cells, which build up yet more viruses. Spread of infected cells build up immune system cells, which lower the spread of infected cells. Ladies and gentlemen, for this model, as for many system dynamics models, not all certainly, but many, regulatory processes are depicted with feedbacks that can be very nicely represented. And we can have a whole dynamics associated going on with a person that's captured in a very technically sweet way with differential equations. Indeed, there's a lot of theory in the literature that's couched in the language of these sorts of equations. And all we did was transcribe them to system dynamics and plunk them here into a model. I will say that this model was a lot more opaque to me until I put it into any logic. We were simulating it numerically as differential equations, but I didn't really have a visceral sense as to its dynamics, just conjecture, until I put it into this framework and could actually see it spread visually. That's when I understood some of its salient dynamics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can stop that experiment. I'd like you to go now to the medium fatal viral threshold. Let's go see what that involves, ladies and gentlemen. If we go look at the parameter values, here we have a different fatal viral level threshold. For the high one, we had 1,000. For the medium one, we have 100. And if we go look at person, what we will find is that if in this state chart, a person goes from the living to dead state if, check it out, if their viral level goes above the viral threshold. And think about an elderly person in a nursing home. Their immune system is weaker. They have high levels of viremia, and they may die from flu, even though a younger person may shake it off. And here we can capture that. One of the beauties of using system dynamics to describe the dynamics is we can simply put in conditions, much as we did with a budding hybrid model, put in conditions involving a stock, and it will be checking this regularly. And it will trigger this transition if a person goes above this fatal viral load threshold. Something that's of note even by Krugerian levels of knowledge. Yes?
Just checking it. So that condition is being continually checked. There's no time cycle.
It's a very, very fine-grained time cycle. I think it's at the level at which the numerical integration is occurring. And if we go up to the model as a whole, you'll find that you can set the, and I can't actually remember with certainty if it's this one or this one, but I thought it was fixed time step until recently. In any case, it's an extremely fine level of granularity. So you don't have to set an event or anything. You just put this in place And because the underlying V here, which is in the stock and flow, is being simulated, it will be checking this on an ongoing basis. And so notice that the dynamics of this person are not purely continuous. It's not purely this regulatory dynamics captured by the stocks and flows. It's also captured by this discrete living dying. So let's run that. Medium viral load threshold. And one of the beauties of this is we can simulate people with different levels of immunocompetence. Some people have greater levels of control over their viral fluctuations. They may be subject to larger levels of viral infection because they have less strong immune response. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, this response down here is less strong because they have a weaker value of C. This sort of indicates how strong the immune system responds in response to the presence of infected cells. And so that would be like someone who has impaired immune response, and as a result, they have higher levels of viral fluctuations, and those people off in some cases. So think about a very elderly person in a nursing home whose immune system is weaker, and as a result, some of those people can die from this adverse viral load. If we simulated this purely as a differential equation, that would be harder to capture, the fact that they've passed away. But because it's a hybrid model, we have both these state charts on the one hand and the stocks and flows on the other. We can capture that very well. I won't go into it in detail, but we have quite a few models like this of immune system dynamics. But another big area that we have invested in is the area of physiological dynamics, particularly for weight regulation. So we can have people in any logic, and we have a model like this, where each person has dynamics characterized by very well studied and published estimates of weight, of metabolism change and weight regulation and body composition that have emerged from a number of studies, and particularly very careful measurements done at the NIH and carefully controlled environments where everyone's food intake, dietary exercise, and excreted matter, and even their exhalations are all measured. And so they've actually created very nice stock and flow models, ordinary differential equation models, which can be placed into this directly. And we have models like that where regulatory factors associated with an individual are captured. Kurt here is, to his great credit, working on such models to capture the dynamics associated with addiction to things like e-cigarettes and cigarettes. But the principle carries over to many other areas. And Jeff here has introduced us to something called perceptual control theory, where we can place a person's perceptions and their actions, their perceptions, and their state into a framework that's regulatory in nature and can be neatly described with these stocks and flows. Most agent-based modelers, I would guess 98% of agent-based modelers are unaware of the availability of these sort of things. And one of AnyLogic's great strengths is the ability to place these things in there very easily. You can go from a published paper into this sort of stock and flow characterization, often very neatly, very nicely. And it's a very elegant way to characterize regulatory processes. Situations where I have continuous variables like level of viral load, or like my current weight, or my current fat mass, or my current level of nicotine addiction. And you want to understand how that changes over time in response to my behavioral actions, my smoking of a cigarette, or my use of an e-cigarette, or my use of a nicotine patch, or what have you. So we can capture these regulatory dynamics very neatly in a conceptually transparent fashion in a way that is mostly declarative. This involves really almost no programming in any normal sense of it. It's quite transparent. We just put in the formulas for these flows, which can often be read out directly from the involved mathematics of this. So these sort of models of individual dynamics characterized with stocks and flows are very useful. And I'm sure Kurt will be willing to give a glimpse of some of his models along these forms. Think about it also for things like trust or risk perception. If you want to capture, in short, the dynamics of continuous quantities, you can do so with this. And this harks back, of course, to what we were working on not 2 hours thence with the food and physical environment, where I showed you, or where we at least showed this to you, where we had a person, their weight status was characterized using stocks and flows. Same basic idea, but the future plan for this that will take place even in this summer will be to replace that whole segment with a very articulated physiological model garnered from these NIH studies, and we'll be able to have then this neighborhood movement of individuals with their weight dynamics and metabolic dynamics and body composition dynamics being captured by a really thoroughly empirically grounded model. Okay? So a very powerful way of using these models, a combination of hybrid of system dynamics modeling and agent-based modeling. Kurt, do you want to make any utterances about sort of your models?
Maybe I can leave that open in case anyone has questions.
Very good. Very good. So feel free to ask after the session ends. Okay. Any questions right now about that? Very powerful, very useful, very practical, very straightforward. Very straightforward. If you really think about it, ladies and gentlemen, the mechanisms that were dealt with, or that were dealt by agent-based modeling at a traditional level, like the state charts, very useful. Action charts, very useful indeed. Very nice for capturing, with state charts, movement among categorical states, right? States that are distinguished as categorical variables. The fact that I'm in a state of diabetic versus normal glycemic or what have you. I'm in a state of unemployment, I'm in a state of part-time employment, full-time, or what have you. But when you start dealing with quantities that are continuous, you wouldn't want to put them into a state chart. My level of immune system activation. I could have 10 different levels of immune system activation, but the things that tend to lower it from the upper levels tend to also lower it from lower levels, and it tends to be highly repetitive, and it's also just not a natural fit, as Andrei Borshev, the prime sort of brainstorm behind the prime force behind any logic, says. It's not natural. So if you want to capture the dynamics of continuous quantities, immune system activation, weight, trust, level of nicotine addiction, level of risk perception, stocks and flows are a very nice way to do it. And it isn't exactly traditional agent-based modeling, but who's keeping track? We don't have time to adhere to these old tribal divisions. They were carved at a time that was very different, and many of them are gratuitous and serve only to hold us back. So if cleaning up your model, if having a clear model is achieved by putting in, mixing in some system dynamics, stocks and flows with your agent-based model, why not? It's clean, it's transparent, it'll communicate with stakeholders, and frankly, it's a lot more natural than having just a variable which in some code you update here and there. Stocks and flows allow you to do it with a level of expressiveness and conciseness and mathematical rigor that's really admirable compared to what you'd have if you wrote the code yourself. So don't be held back by thinking that's a system dynamics thing and I'm building an agent-based model. There is a challenge though, and it would be remiss of me to not mention it with these stocks and flows models. there's a challenge that confronts even the likes of Kurt as he pursues his PhD. And that challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is one of computational scaling. It turns out in current AnyLogic, adding these things into each agent in your model imposes significant performance overhead. I believe that performance overhead is gratuitous in many cases. And I think it can be greatly lowered. And we will try to continuously push that message of how important it is. But at the current time, don't expect a model which includes these things to be able to scale to tens of thousands of agents. It's going to be really slow. So if you have a model that's thousands of agents, you could probably get away with it. Certainly hundreds, no problem. If you start to go over that, you're going to start to run into performance barriers if you're using these stocks and flows within agents. So you got to be cautious about that. Now we have our ways, and we've been pushing the limits some, but really AnyLogic needs to step up to the bar and better support agent-based models that incorporate ubiquitous stocks and flows for it to really become performant. Kurt or Dylan, do you want to make any comments along those lines?
I do. I'm glad to hear it won't affect my PhD. Just Kurt's.
Well, the scope of your model is yet to be fully delineated.
No, you just said yeah, so. Bad Kurt.
So, Dylan, do you want to make any comments?
Well, often I'll find myself doing some very simple things inside of agents with stock and flows just to represent, like Nate said, some of the more aggregate processes, like let's say blood alcohol content or a person's hemoglobin levels. And I find that as I get more agents and I need it to be more complicated, I'll find different ways to optimize it. So for instance, if I only care that math is at a really low resolution, if I only need to have that update every 10 minutes as opposed to every fraction of a second, and the diagram is simple enough you can write your own, you can do it yourself, you really wouldn't want to, and you can still go further than that even, but the more complicated the system dynamics thing you have, the less feasible it is to do any kind of manual optimization. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think really it's up to them to step up to the bar in the next minor version or two, and just fix it once and for all. Yeah, and I think they'll hear it because hybrid modeling is one of their key draws. But anyway, just be warned that above levels of thousands of agents, it gets really painful, and there are some ways to optimize it. Some, as Dylan says, but yeah.
The other thing is, you think, when they're compiling it, they should at least be able to parallelize the process a little bit. Like if you have 100,000 agents, they're all going through an integration step. Even before you go and just trigger new events. It seems like with a little bit of thought, right, they could get some squeezing out of it, but we don't know the internals of the tool. So.
Yeah. Jeff, you want to?
Well, I just want to mention that this has been used clinically. Particularly a famous example in anemia management in dialysis patient, looking at the dose of erythropoietin. So there's just a simple physiological model that's then calibrated with 5 individual parameters for these patients. So that's a colleague of ours, Jim Rogers, did that at Mayo Clinic. And the interesting thing was that Dylan put that into a hybrid model to show.
In fact, it's right there.
Oh, it's still there. Good.
I've given it to you.
Yeah,
it's called Anemia and Agents.
Yeah, so the idea there is that let's look at really how the change in how do people adopt a new way of treating people. So people using an old protocol, which was basically not accounting for the delay in the dosing, so they're actually getting oscillation because they were tampering with the dose too often. And this shows, if you like, how the uptake of that goes. So it's a pretty simple model with, again, patients and prescribers, and they can influence each other's way of treating which protocol they use.
So this is, yeah, people's red blood cells and providers associated with this, these prescribers. And they have simple states here, uses old protocol, uses new protocol. And then there's, I think this is associated with different sets of patients, as I recall.
Yeah, they're their patients, and then they're their...
These are the providers, I think, here.
They're the patients, maybe they're providing, you click on it and you show which patient.
Yeah, these are for those patients, these are for this other
Yeah,
one.
you show which group of which providers patients, which providers are adopting the new protocol.
So yeah, here's a provider that's adopted the new protocol, I think.
Yeah.
And their patients are relative to the patients of, for example, this one or this one, who exhibit patients with adverse outcomes. Yeah.
I think the cool thing about this model is, this was actually the first time I had sat down with any logic in a workshop. I had never seen it before, and within the span of 2 days, we had reproduced clinical results that took months, years to figure out. So it's really just amazing what you can do with a simple model if you have an idea about how the system actually works. So,
Yeah. So this is a multi-scale model. Again, you've got several different levels of aggregation, and you may find it interesting to sort of take a look at and see how Dylan had it. So when you click on a provider, it shows their patients, etc. Some nice things there. A fine job, and it's based on, although it doesn't adhere to all the details of a clinical case story of great significance clinically. Yeah. Okay. Any other things, Jeff, you want to mention before I go in? I'm going to go into outputting to files and reading from files.
No.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let us now steel ourselves for a final push. Okay, I realize